Hi everyone. You are on the Software Developer blog channel. Today in the video I will touch on a very interesting topic about code testing, namely about unit tests. We talk about whether they are needed or whether you can do without them, about testing levels, best practices and much more. But before you start watching, don't forget to like this video. It helps in the development of the channel and motivates me to continue its development. So let's start from the very beginning and talk about testing levels. Basically, you can find an option where there are 3 levels of testing. The first level is unit testing, the second integration testing includes system testing, third acceptance testing. We can say that software development is a movement along the pyramid from the bottom up. The higher the level of tests, the more difficult to implement and require specialists of the appropriate level. More expensive to implement, more important for business and more critical for users. As an example, Google uses the 70-20-10 rule when developing, that is, 70% of tests are unit tests, 20% are integration tests, and only 10% are end-to-end tests. So now that you know the levels of testing, we can talk about the first and most important and often used. These are unit tests. I have heard many times and in practice seen that many developers do not like to write tests and treat test code as second-rate, that is, they do not follow best practices when writing tests. Consider it not important, or write tests for the sake of coverage, where this is mandatory system, or even don't want to spend time on tests at all. By the way, write in the comments. It's very interesting to know your opinions on whether you cover your code with unit tests, whether they are necessary or whether it's a waste of time. So let's get back to unit tests. I will be categorical and say my opinion that unit tests are needed, period. And now I'll explain why. Firstly, if you have good unit tests, then you reduce the number of mistakes that you could have made during development, or made them, but thanks to the tests you found them and corrected them. Secondly, it saves you from problems with releases. If the CI/CD process is built correctly, then tests should be run before releases to production. If they pass, then the release process starts. The tests will help you understand that you have problems that could break your product. Thirdly, it will be easier for new people in the team to enter a project with tests than without them. For example, if there is a complex and complicated code, then it is easier to read it. Thanks to the tests, again if they are good, I myself often do this if it's difficult for me to figure out a method. I go into unit tests and start looking at the logic and understand much faster what is happening in it. It's convenient and it's faster to understand the code thanks to tests. The fourth reason is a greater understanding of your code and points for improving it. You have written a whole class and start writing a test for it. And it is at the moment of writing tests that you most often realize that, for example, some method is duplicated, or it is better to split it into 2 for better understanding or testing. The fifth reason is that your skill and level as a developer increases. It's not enough to just write code. Real professionals can and know how it works and how to test it. In the process of writing unit tests, they can understand vulnerabilities in the code and eliminate them. As for the basic best practices when writing tests, this is to have tests of different scenarios, positive and negative, for each method. Create a TestDataFactory where you can put the code for creating test data. Ideally have 100% code coverage and much more depending on your language programming. The only disadvantage of writing unit tests is time, and this is probably the most important thing, why many projects simply don't have them. Businesses simply don't want to pay for writing high-quality unit tests. In 90% of cases, businesses are not interested in the quality of the code, best practices, tests. It is important for them to receive a working product within the specified time frame, and that's all. But this is not the right position, which can lead to the fact that such a business, project, company may go bankrupt in the end. Since due to the lack of tests there will be many bugs in the final product, the consumer will complain, and the developer simply will not be able to cope with the number of bugs. Because each new fix causes a new bug that cannot be noticed, since there are no unit tests in the system, and the process comes down to a cycle. In connection with this, customers simply pack up and go to competitors. The reviews about the product are terrible and in the end we end up with a bankrupt company. Yes, perhaps I embellished the situation a little, but in general the concept is clear. I would just advise you to accept the rules for yourself that the functionality must be covered by tests. And try to explain to the business on the project that this is an integral part of development, without which the final product cannot be released and . And that's all for me. Write it in the comments. It's very interesting to know your opinion about unit tests and whether you write them on projects. Also, don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Here you will learn a lot of new and interesting things from the world of development. Until we meet again, bye.